Hey, folks, and welcome to the 24/7 DCT podcast. I'm Brian Wall, your host, with over 2 decades of experience across 4 countries in areas of mental health and addiction, with hopes of promoting awareness for listeners, bridging the gap for those needing support, and offering treatment guidance throughout for those that choose to be in our tribe. You can follow us on all major social media platforms by searching 24/7 DCT and online at 247dct.org to gain access to evidence-based treatment resources and support. This week's episode is yet another effort on our behalf to more closely track our tribe and bring awareness to issues like mental health, addiction, general wellness, and everything in between. So let's go ahead and get started with another opportunity to meet a member of our 24/7 DCT family. In fact, this week we have actually a returning guest. Catherine Engel is an associate vice president of a local community mental health center in Ohio and licensed as a professional clinical counselor with supervision designation. Catherine completed her undergraduate degree at Xavier University, earning a bachelor's degree in biology and a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling. Catherine has been working in the mental health field for over a decade with a focus on the transitional youth and adult populations affected by homelessness. Catherine has clinical experience providing mental health assessments and risk assessments in both inpatient and community settings, as well as experience providing individual and group counseling. Additionally, she possesses extensive experience in crisis intervention and evidence-based practice of critical time intervention. Catherine actually leads up our clinical programming in Ohio. Let's bring her on board. Welcome back, Catherine. It's good to have you on again.
Hi, it's great to be back.
Yeah, I think the transition was bringing folks on. We're learning. This is fun. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule. Today's topic of suicide prevention is obviously very important and near and dear to both our hearts, considering our expertise in crisis intervention, which is why I wanted to share some recent statistics that I found from the Center for Disease Control to educate our listeners and bring them on board with why this is such an important topic, as if it doesn't scream that from the beginning. But approximately 48,000 people died by suicide in 2021, which is about one death every 11 minutes. In 2020, 12.2 million seriously thought about suicide, 3.2 million in the US made a plan to carry out their death, and 1.2 million actually attempted suicide. Males generally die by suicide 3.5 times more often than females, while females have suicidal thoughts more often than males, we found. On average, there are about 132 suicides per day in the United States, with white males accounting for 7 out of every 10 suicides in 2016, still about the same ratio in the current times. A firearm is used in almost 50% of all suicides. The rate of suicide is highest in the middle-aged, especially among white males, actually. And suicide is the third leading cause of death for Gen Z, ages 15 to 24. These are staggering statistics, to say the least, Catherine. So thanks for joining us today to pick apart this topic a bit for our listeners.
Yeah, so thank you, Brian, for that
Yeah.
introduction and for some of the wonderful intro. For me, it's nice to see you again, and
Yeah.
I am happy to be here. But yes, this is a very serious topic, but also something that I think is really important that we talk about as much as we can and generate awareness and accurate information around. And I just want to preface the information I'm going to share that it is my sources are primarily CDC, the National Institute of Mental Health, and SAMHSA. So I like to share my sources up front,
Yeah.
so everybody knows I'm just not making this up. It comes from credible
Yeah.
sources, and that way too. If after this podcast you're interested in learning more, you can head to those websites, and and beyond. There's so much
Yeah.
information out there, but those are some great places to start.
Yeah,
So
thanks for saying that. That's why I mentioned CDC on my end as well. Probably the researchers in us, with grad degrees and all we do in our field. And And it's so important because you can punch in anything into Google and get all kinds of information from sources that aren't as reliable. And I think it's really important to track those that are research based and folks that really actually manage this data in a way that is fair and reliable.
Yeah, for sure. And so those are some places you could look for more information. A lot of what they cite is evidence-based, and you can find, more resources that are credible there. But today I wanted to spend some time talking about and trying to debunk maybe some misconceptions or myths around, suicide or suicide prevention. Sometimes we think about, what causes suicide, or, what are factors that play into it. And, while obviously there isn't one specific cause or one factor that can lead to that outcome, there are risk factors that through research have been identified, as well as protective factors, which is, positive. So some things that can prevent I shouldn't say prevent, but protect perhaps around suicide risk would be things like having healthy, safe coping mechanisms. And the more we can build those, the more of a protective factor we have, and it strengthens that. Reasons for living. So oftentimes, if someone has a support network that they feel connected to, that can be a protective factor. A strong sense of community or community identity, cultural identity, things like that. And really some other protective factors might include religious or cultural beliefs. Reduced access to means is another possible, like, societal level protective factor. And actually access to consistent and quality, affordable healthcare is another potentially protective factor. So that I think is important. I think platforms like Digital Care Team and others, trying to make access to care as accessible as possible is so critical these days. So those are some protective factors. And there's some great information out there about for adults as well as youth. And so some of those protective factors might look a little different depending on the population we're talking about. But those are some general ones.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so important to recognize that this is an ongoing process. Certainly we feel at times suicide just pops up, but oftentimes it's progressive, and it begins with deteriorating factors in our own life because we're not taking care of ourselves, or crisis or trauma hits, and we don't have that support system in place to get through those difficult times, and that leads to a more depressive state that causes a lot of the ideation. So important to keep ourselves healthy ongoing. Also, you mentioned some of these protective factors. When I'm interviewing folks and concerned about suicidal ideation, suicidal thoughts, that sort of thing, I'm always looking for that future orientation. Are they in a place where they're looking to focus on the past and focus on the problem? They just can't quite get past that. Or are they in a place where they understand that, this happened and it's unfortunate, but there is hope, and I do have something in the future that I'm looking to do. I think that's really healthy to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think you bring up some really great points. And also have kind of experienced in my work is times of transition can also be potential risk factor, in the sense that transitions tend, even potentially positive ones, can bring upon some stress, some additional stressors that were not, as prevalent when we're sort of not in times of flux like that. So that's something to think about too, when we are in state of transition from maybe job to job, a marriage ending, and starting a new chapter. But any kind of life transition, is significant and can just, I think, impact not only our mental health, but just our ability to manage additional stressors in the environment. So, Go ahead. Sorry.
So let's tease this out. So you know me, I got questions, right? I want to know a little more, and this helps me kind of categorize in my own brain. What is this about? Where did it come from? Where do we go with it? That sort of thing. And I feel like that may be helpful to our listeners as well. So I mentioned that from my own research with the CDC, suicide is highest in middle age, specifically white males, and then also the third leading cause for Gen X ages 15 to 24. I'm wondering on top of that, did you find or do you know of any information you can share with us that others that are at higher risk?
Yeah, let's talk about risk factors for a little
Yeah.
bit, just like in general. So I know we spent a little time talking about protective factors, but some of the things, and I want to be clear because sometimes we talk about warning signs, and
Mm,
that's different than risk factors. And we can talk about warning signs in a little bit as well if you'd like. But risk factors, really, again, like we mentioned earlier, suicide is rarely the result of a single incident or circumstance, one factor. It's typically a range of factors. That could be individual factors, relational, so like
hmm.
relationship related things, community, or even at a societal level. So some of the risk factors, that we sometimes hear about are things like, if somebody has a previous history of suicidal thoughts or
Yeah.
attempts, if they've got serious illness or chronic pain, things like that, feeling hopeless, potentially a history of being the victim of some form of abuse, other things, bullying, and I think that's out there kind of in the media
Yeah.
more. We see
Hmm.
that, social isolation, substance use can play a role. And again, this, because someone has one of these factors, does not necessarily equate to suicidal risk, but we're just giving you kind of an overview of potential factors that might increase someone's risk,
Right.
especially I think if there's a range of factors present. But again, you also have to look at how many protective factors somebody has and
Hmm.
what their individual state and situation looks like. So there are several other risk factors, but that's just a handful.
Yeah.
Also wanting to look at kind of their current situation and, have they had a crisis very recently, or are there some precipitating kind of events leading up to a potential crisis? Those may be times where, again, people are under more extreme stress than they're used to.
Hmm.
Um, think about things like getting evicted, or, losing housing for some reason, job or financial stressors, legal problems, health problems. All of those things can play a role.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a metaphor guy. I love to think about things in the context of sports and games and how a kind of contest of life unfolds. I see life as sort of a contest for me sometimes, trying to keep that balance of the risk and protective factors. Hopefully the protective outweigh the risk, right? And so always looking for that. And it's sort of like, when anytime you have a sports team play another sports team, it's never as simple as, okay, this team has the better record, they're going to win this weekend. It's never that simple, right? So if this team has the best record, but they're coming off of 3 straight games on the road and they're traveling to another away game and it happens to be in 3 feet of snow, 30 below zero, and their quarterback is injured, and all these factors play in. And so this team might be undefeated, but they're going against a team that is much better equipped to take them down that weekend. So I look at life and these kind of factors in the same way. It's fine keeping your team healthy ongoing so that you don't get yourself in a situation when that below zero game or that road game comes when the quarterback's injured. You don't have to worry about walking away with a loss that weekend. You can still pull out a win. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's a great metaphor.
Thanks, Catherine.
Yeah. um, and actually, looking at this CDC's information, they cited that actually out of the risk factors, one that I guess was reported more highly was like relational problems. So when you're looking at kind of those environmental
Yeah.
factors, relationship issues and stressors, tend to be a more common risk factor.
Yeah. So what are some of the warning signs? That seems like the natural
Yeah.
next direction to go here.
Yeah. So, like I said, risk factors, are some of those environmental, it could be individual, community sort of factors that may, lend to someone, then, being in an environment or a situation where their risk increases.
Hmm.
But warning signs, um, that's really behavior, things that maybe an individual may be exhibiting that maybe in response to some sort of recent crisis or stressor or transition or change. But some of the types of warning signs that are recommended to be on the lookout for, and again, not one specific one means one thing or another, but just kind of
Right.
in
It's not as
general,
black
these are
and
some of
white
the
as we'd
things.
like it to be,
Yeah.
but
But according to the CDC and the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, the
mhm.
websites, they all kind of say similar things. So if you're looking around at warning signs online, you may see some variation, but some of the common threads, obviously, if someone is voicing that they want to die, or they plan to kill themselves, that's a pretty clear warning sign, a pretty imminent one.
Mhm.
If someone is perhaps looking for a way to kill themselves, looking for means,
Mhm.
talking about being hopeless, or not really having any reason to live. So those are little more direct and kind of in your face, but also some things that may be a little more subtle to kind of look out for might be, if a person starts feeling like a burden to other people, and to
Mhm.
their loved ones, if maybe increasing their use of substances, another sort of symptom could be like an increase or lack of sleep, isolation, especially when it's a change. If you notice somebody is starting to withdraw more, can be a warning sign. Also mood swings can
Mhm.
sometimes, but that again, some of these things can be, potential symptoms or signs of, various mental health conditions as well. So it's important to just keep that in mind. But again, if it changes from someone's typical presentation, also
Right.
might indicate that something has shifted, something might be going on for that person. And so then that leads us to kind of like, so okay, if we notice these warning signs in someone or in yourself, then what do you do, right?
Right. Right. Right.
um so we can talk a little bit about, I wanted to talk a little bit about that tonight, or today, depending on when you're listening to this, but strategies to prevent suicide. So there's so much out there about suicide prevention strategies, and really depending on what you're interested in, you can see, obviously nationally, state level, community level, there's a lot of initiatives out there. But I
Mhm.
really wanted to provide information, like if you had a friend, or something like that, you don't have to be a licensed professional, but like, what can you do if you're worried about someone? How can
Yeah.
we all as a community support one another?
Right.
So one, great website that has been put together since 988 was developed, and perhaps
Ingenious.
before that was, yeah, so there's this be1to.com. I don't know if you've been there,
I
but
have. I
have
love it.
you?
Yeah.
I love it because it just really breaks it down, and they identify what they call 5 action steps.
Mhm.
And I love this because it's very practical
Yes.
information. And anybody can initiate these 5 steps. And that's really the idea, is that, if you're, if you become aware essentially of somebody in your life that maybe, at risk, or you're worried about, and or might be in crisis,
Mhm.
the 5 steps are as follows. The first thing is to ask, how they're doing, ask if they are thinking about harming themselves. I know one myth that has come up in the past, has been, oh, well, if I bring it up, will that
Yes.
increase their risk?
Yes. I was
If I
wondering about
mention
that.
suicide, is that going to put, thoughts in their head? And actually, research has shown that directly asking about if someone is thinking about hurting themselves does not that doesn't increase the risk. If they were thinking about it, um, that was already present, and if they weren't, there's no evidence out there to strongly suggest a linkage there that I could
Right.
find. So they definitely encourage asking about it. And then the second step is really to be there.
Mhm.
So listening, which sounds so simple, but really being compassionate, empathetic, trying not to dismiss how the other person feels, and then keeping them safe is the third piece. So
Mhm.
obviously safety is paramount in a like this. So if you have a friend or a loved one that may be thinking about suicide, ask them, if they thought about a plan, like how they might carry it out. Do they know? And then think about what's their access like to things that they could hurt themselves with. So if we
Mhm.
can create a safe environment as much as possible, that also helps. So removing firearms or excessive pills and things like that, um, to help them connect is number four.
Mhm.
So that support system piece that we talked about earlier is so critical.
Yeah.
But not everybody feels comfortable with maybe talking to their loved one, and that's again where reaching out to a professional could be helpful. Toward the end of this, I did want to 988 and just make sure everybody has that information,
Thank you.
because there are 24/7 emergency resources out there. So there's always someone to reach out to for help, and
Yes.
no matter who it is, we just want people to know that that's out there. So don't be afraid to reach out. And then lastly, to follow up, to check in with the person on a regular basis, even if they're not in an imminent crisis. One thing that I think is interesting, and maybe you too, Brian, in our line of work, is
Yeah.
there is some research that's been done about showing that in times of crisis, when people do receive follow-up care, it greatly can reduce the recidivism of maybe having to go back to the hospital, or
Yeah.
become, falling back into a crisis in a short period of time after that. So that the value and power of follow-up is really, really key.
Yeah.
And so that may help make a difference with that person and helping to keep them alive. So
Yeah.
some really practical information there, but I think I just want to get it out there to folks. And again, you can go to be the12.com to find more information on this.
Amazing. Perfect. And it's practical. It's simple. I think we overcomplicate things oftentimes in our field, and just being trained and experienced in what I do has helped me to I don't want to say dumb it down, because I don't think I talk to people that are dumber than me. I think I'm probably in that bunch myself at times, and some of the decisions I make, but learning with each other, and having real conversations and having simple conversations. I found with folks that I've worked with over the years that when I do introduce that question of, hey, have you had thoughts about hurting yourself? That oftentimes opens the door. It almost drops this curtain of like they've been hiding behind, and when I open that door, it's like, hey man, it's okay. We can talk about this. You're human first. This is not fun. Life is hard, but I want to let you know up front that I'm going to do everything in my power to keep you alive and keep you well. And you're welcome to hate me for that. You know, this is important to
Yeah.
me. So we're going to have this conversation, and I want you to know you're not going to be able to shake me off with a stick. I'm going to stick it out with you. We're going to do this journey together. We're going to figure it out, and we're going to get you feeling better. But you got to trust me a little bit. Let's talk about this. Let's see where it takes us. And so having those real conversations, and then you brought it up before. I think super important. A lot of times, folks think there's this magic formula, there's magic wand, in these kind of situations. It's relationships, it's engagement, it's communication, it's tracking each other, it's knowing what Brian's typical behaviors are like. And when Brian's off the grid a bit, someone needs to go ask Brian, hey, bro, you feeling okay today? Like, pull me aside. Catherine's my girl, right? Catherine's going to come over and say, hey, B, what's up, man? Like, you seem off today. I love you and I care about you. What do you need from me today? I want to be a support, right? And I think those are really important conversations to have, but they also help us gauge where folks are at on the radar. So, do you believe, with that said, those are real occurrences, and I've heard this before, and I want to debunk it. I want your help. Do you believe that some people threaten suicide simply for attention?
So I will say, based on my experience, I think I think most behaviors serve some sort of purpose or are a means to communicate something.
Yes.
And so, oftentimes if someone is, feeling like they might hurt themselves or expressing that, to me, I want to find out more about what's going on with that person. And as a counselor by training, or anyone in this kind of field, we, we are compelled to act upon any report like that, and do a thorough assessment and make sure that that's all taken seriously. So I think it's really important to never assume that someone is not serious when they are voicing any kind of suicidal thoughts. I think first we always need to take that very seriously and assess it further, ask more questions, gather more information,
Yeah.
and monitor them until we know they can continue to be safe at in whatever current environment they're in. And if they can't, then it's our responsibility to help gather the right people so that they can be safe.
Yeah, I love that. I'm on your team for sure. I think that we're asking the wrong question. Are they serious or are they lying? It's not about that. It's about, what are they trying to communicate? Like, what is that? What are they saying right now? And if we're tracking them ongoing, and I know Catherine's baseline, and this is what I'm starting to hear from Catherine. Catherine's not in a good place. I need to go love on her. I need to find out what she needs from me today as a support, right? And so sometimes it's not about this or that. I think we're asking the wrong question, So I love what you just said, in that tracking the person and um, finding out, where's that coming from? What is that about? So thank you so much. I appreciate your time today. I always appreciate you joining me, and you're super comfortable,
Oh, well, thank you.
I love that about you. You're seriously really comfortable for me. And I love that you're part of our team, because this is what our clients are going to experience as well. And if you're interested in engaging with a therapist like Catherine, you can find more information online at 247dct.org. So don't hesitate to reach out if you believe we can be a benefit to you on your journey. That brings us to
And
Real Talk. Go ahead.
oh, I'm
No,
so
you're fine.
sorry. I was just gonna say, to wrap up our conversation on suicide prevention, I
Yeah.
just wanted to end, my part on saying, 988 is the new, well, it was new as of last year,
Oh,
3-digit
yes.
phone
Yes. Thank
phone
you.
code that you can get to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Now they're calling it 988 Suicide and Crisis Line Lifeline, but it
Just
is.
remember the 988. That's
Just
most
remember the
important.
numbers. 988. And you can call, text. And one thing I think is important to know is it doesn't you can call as a loved one. So you can be the person that needs help, you can be a loved one or friend, or
Yes.
just being aware of someone that needs help. But that's 24/7. They have professionals that are trained specifically to handle those calls. So, please know that exists. 988, simple number to remember.
Yeah.
And that can get you connected to other resources as well.
Right on. Yeah, those folks are there to be just that, an extension of your tribe. They want to keep folks safe. They want to be a support, and they're there 24/7. There's always somebody on the other end. And so if you ever feel like you need support, or someone that could use support in a time of crisis, feel free, please reach out. 988, super simple. And those guys will be able to guide you from there. Thanks so much, Catherine.
Thanks, Brian. Take care.
Yeah. So that brings us to Real Talk with Brian, and this week's encouragement is brought to you by Joyce Meyer, evangelist. I don't know how this will sound. I like Joyce. I was actually baptized in the Holy Spirit by her way back when. I used to go to some of her conferences and listen to a lot of her Battlefield of the Mind tapes and stuff, and they really helped me through a lot of dark times. So I wanted to share this with you guys. When you're tempted to give up, your breakthrough is most often just around the corner. That's been the case for me so many times, I can't even tell you. And even proved to be when I was suicidal in the 90s. I'm forever indebted to my psychiatrist at the time and family that supported me and got me the help I needed. I ultimately realized I'd be killing the wrong person. So I checked myself into a local psych hospital, and am incredibly grateful for the staff there and all the support that they offered. I eventually actually got a better understanding of why I was feeling the way I was feeling, and was able to more directly address those issues, which got me moving the right direction. And interestingly enough, part of my comeback story, I returned to that same psych hospital 3 years later to work for them, and stayed with them for over 7 years as a clinician, complete my graduate degree. It's some business development stuff for them. And then eventually was promoted to their mobile crisis team supervisor. So did all this overnight stuff, meeting folks at med-surg facilities and doing assessments, making sure they're on the right track to get the help they need. So it was an awesome experience that I never would have had if I had ended my life on that February day in 1999. So all that to say, a lot can change in 24 hours, folks. You can also follow my weekly trilogy series on LinkedIn at hashtag BeRealWithBrian to gain insight in the areas of mental health, addiction, and general wellness. I appreciate everyone that joined us today. Be sure to check us out on all major social media platforms by searching 247 DCT or online at 247dct.org for more support. We look forward to spending time with you next week as we welcome yet another guest who's committed to getting you feeling better.